I hope Michael Leslie is watching right now, because Michael is sick, and he could not be here because he's sick. So I'm going to talk about him for a little bit. Oh, also, what are these? Oh my goodness. I wonder if I'll be giving those out to people. So, thank you all for coming out tonight to celebrate audio narration in audiobooks. As you know, Michael could not be here tonight as he isn't feeling his best at the moment. I wanted to take a second to talk about him and his work before we get to the panel, though. As many of you know, Michael has done quite a few of my books. In fact, his very first audio recording was of my novel, Tell Me It's Real. If you know that novel, I'm about to hurt your feelings. It's 10 years old this year. Oh my God, it's so old. Like, I wrote that line and I was like, that's really funny. And now it's just hitting me that we're all gonna die someday. If you've read that book, you know that it was the first time I indulged in my very serious sense of humor. And not only did Michael get that, he ran with it, making something wonderful out of something absolutely ridiculous. And speaking of ridiculous, I would be remiss if I didn't point out before Michael did the Extraordinary series for Teen, he did a different series. I am speaking, of course, about Tales from Brainium. Now, if you've read or listened to these books, you know that they are odd. As a matter of fact, I figured out the best way to describe them in 2 words. They are erotic Shrek. For those who have read them, right? It's erotic Shrek. Okay. But if you know, but what I loved about Michael was that he took this huge cast of characters and brought them to life, but he also reveled in the absurdity of those books, which he was remarkable at. After all, is there anyone else in the world you could imagine singing a song called Cheesy Dicks and Candlesticks? Because I wrote that song and he sang it on the audiobook. But enough about Michael. He decided to get sick, so he doesn't get to hear me talk nicely about him anymore. Michael, feel better. I have been so lucky to work with some of the best narrators in the industry. Michael and Kirt have been recording audios of my books for years, and it felt important to me to bring along on this ride to Macmillan and Tor. It can be really scary to all of a sudden be in the wide and wonderful world of traditional publishing. To have Michael and Kirt there along with me really helped me quite a bit because there was familiarity in what they do. I know how they perform, I know their work ethic, and even more that, I trust them to do right by the characters. It can be really hard to trust people in this industry, especially when you have a background like I do, coming from a publisher that did not respect the artists and the creatives that they published and worked. But Kirt and Michael have more than proven themselves as remarkable people and narrators. Daniel Henning is another story. As many of you know, I signed with Tor, first for the Extraordinaries and then for Cerulean. The decision was made to release Cerulean first. Given that I had no idea what I was doing, I didn't know if I was able to suggest narrators or not. But before I could even think to ask that question, Macmillan Audio sent me an audition by someone I'd never heard before. I was told he had a background in theater and that he'd be right for this particular project. I listened, and within the first minute, I knew that Daniel would be the voices of the Gremlins and their dads. So much so that when it came time to think about In the Lives of Puppets, I wanted to hear what Daniel could do with that. Like before, it took only a minute or so for me to hear that he was right for In the Lives of Puppets too. Trust me when I say, you are all going to lose your minds when you hear his voices for Rambo, the Roomba vacuum with the heart of gold, and Nurse Ratched, the sociopathic nursing machine. Those 2 characters act as the main character's conscience. So let's introduce the narrators, please. Daniel Henning is an Audie Award finalist, 5-time SOFA Voice Arts Award nominee, and Earphone winner for his fiction and nonfiction narration, including the New York Times bestselling The House in the Cerulean Sea. He is the founding artistic director of Hollywood's The Blank Theater, winning over 200 awards for his productions. He was honored by the California State Legislature as a Pride honoree for his work in LGBTQ equality and nurturing the future of the arts. He won a Telly Award for Best Writer for the film version of his play, The Tragedy of JFK, as told by William Shakespeare. As director and as director and writer, his TV and film work includes MTV. Sorry. Rob Dyrdek's Fantasy Factory. And the Film Critics' Choice. He won the NAACP Theater Award for Best Director of a Musical for The Wild Party. As an actor, his work has been seen on HBO, CBS, NBC, ABC, Fox, MTV, and Jesus, Daniel. He is a graduate of NYU's Tisch School of the Arts, Circle in the Square Theater School, and American Conservatory Theater. Give it up for Daniel Henning. CBS, NBC, ABC, Fox, TV, and Comedy Central. Kirt, let's see what TV shows you've been in.
Mine is shorter.
Kirt Gray spent 15 years empowering young people to find their voices through drama, poetry, and literature as an award-winning speed and debate coach. Now he tells stories as the narrator of hundreds of audiobooks spanning dystopian sci-fi, urban and high fantasy, contemporary romance, and young adult fiction. He has a passion for telling queer stories and the types of stories he wishes he'd had when he was growing up. Off mic, Kirt is a graphic artist, a podcast lover, and an award-winning speech coach. He lives in Wisconsin with his husband and their two very good boys, Bodhi, and I'm really annoyed that you put in a pronunciation guide that I wouldn't know who that character is from Star Wars. So. And his other dog is named Apollo. So, can we please welcome to the stage Kirt Gray.
Hi.
Okie dokie. So, just do your thing. There, that's better. Okay, so we're going to start with a reading. And Daniel, I was hoping if you would go first and tell us what you no, don't tell us what you're reading. Just start reading and see if people know what it is.
I do have to say we've been at this audiobook convention for like 3 days, so I'm a little not quiet in my voice. But I thought I wouldn't do this because it might not sound exactly right, but I thought you all might be with pitchforks and torches if I did. So, Arthur says that we should always make time for the things we like, Talia said. If we don't, we might forget how to be happy. Are you not happy, Mr. Baker? I'm perfectly happy. You're not happy being round, Fee said. So you can't be perfectly happy. I'm not round. What is your job, Mr. Baker? Chauncey asked, eyes bouncing on his thoughts. Isn't it a pity? Linus wasn't hungry anymore. Yes, it's in the city. Chauncey sighed dreamily. I love the city. All the hotels that need bellhops, it sounds like paradise. You've never been to the city, Lucy reminded him. So, I could love something even if I've only seen pictures of it. Mr. Baker loves the ocean, and he only saw it for the first time today. If he loves it so much, why doesn't he marry it? Fee asked. Theodore chirped through a mouthful of meat. The children laughed. Even Sal cracked a smile. Before Linus could ask, Miss Chapelwhite said, Theodore hopes you and the ocean are very happy together.
So I want you guys to imagine something. Imagine you are me, and it is 2019, and you get this email from Macmillan Audio saying we have the perfect person who we think would be good for the House in the Cerulean Sea. He has a background in theater. So let's just audio, and then you hear that Chauncey voice come out of the speaker. I was like, sold! Thank you for that. Kirt, what are you going to do first?
It was just a door. In the ceiling, yes, but it was still just a door. It was wooden, the frame around it painted white. The doorknob was a clear crystal with a green center in the shape of a tea leaf. The whispers that had followed him up the stairs were gone. The insistent tugging on the hook in his chest had subsided. A hush had fallen in the house around them, as if it held its very breath. He said, "It's not much, is it?" "No," Nelson said. "It doesn't look like it, but appearances are deceiving." "Why is it in the ceiling? That's a weird place for it. Has it always been there?" The house itself was strange, so he wouldn't be surprised if it had been part of the original construction, though he didn't know what it could lead to aside from the roof. "That's where the manager put it when he chose Hugo as a ferryman," Nelson said. "Hugo opens the door, and we rise to whatever comes next."
Okay, so the reason, obviously, that we're doing this event is because you guys know I love my narrators. I love my audio narrators. Kirt and Michael, as I said, I've worked with them for many, many years now. And Daniel, we've been working together now for 3 years, and we are getting ready to release our second project within the Lives of Puppets. But the reason that I wanted to do something like this is because every time I do an event, I would say at least 50% of the questions I get asked are about audiobooks, about the narration, how it gets done, who gets to decide how the voices sounds, all of that. So it felt important to me that we actually get the narrators up here to give them a chance to be able to talk about what they do. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, question for Kirt. You have recorded some of my most coziest stories from Green Creek to Under the Whispering Door and Murmuration. You'll also be doing the release of The Bones Beneath My Skin. My question is this: how are you feeling? Do you need a nap or a hug? Or are you like me and you relish knowing that you are going to break people's hearts and laugh maniacally when you do it?
I'll be sending you a bill for my therapy. But no, I also take great pleasure in the dark side. So I actually love that side of you. Your work and your writing.
Okay. And Daniel, could you please tell this wonderful audience what nonfiction books that you do narration for?
I do a lot of different nonfiction. I do mindfulness books, and I do business books, and last year I did 150 hours of Russian history in 7 different books, but the ones that he's referring to, I just last fall, for instance, I did 2 books in a row. They were each 20 hours. They were a prep study guide for the test for computer cloud security professionals.
I'm back to the voice of Chelsea teaching you about typing.
And the answer is...
Okay, so question for both of you. How do you prep for an audiobook recording? Kirt, let's start with you.
It starts with reading the book, which, depending on the type of book it is and how the author works, can be a lot of work or not much work. In your case, you write characters and you have such a specific voice that's just so easy for me, at least, to hear in my head. And one of the remarkable things I think about the work that I've done for you is that I hear from people a lot that what they hear me do is what they heard in their head when they read it, which I think is the really cool thing that you provide. So sometimes it's very easy because you just read the book and you go, oh, this is what this person's going to sound like, and I'm going to make them sound like that for the book. Other times you have to really sit and think about who's going to sound like what is the character like, what's the tone of the book, what's the author's voice, and you sometimes make notes. Some people write a lot of notes, and eventually, you get in the booth and you just have to do it. I don't know that you ever truly feel prepared, but at a certain point, the book must be recorded.
I come from this theater background for a long time, and one of the things that I did was develop new material. So I've been responsible for developing over 1,000 new plays. So I have a lot of experience of like reading words and seeing writers' intentions and then trying to make them come to life. And then I found audiobooks. And in fact, that's the same skill. It comes out slightly differently, but it's that. So of course I read the book. What I generally do when I'm reading the book is I'll mark the characters as I go along. I'll just highlight just their name. And then I'll do another pass through the book where I actually get to that character in the story again. Now I'm know it even more in depth. And then I'll create that voice, and I'll actually record the voice. So I have a sort of, I call it a voice imprint of each one of the characters. If it's like a one-line character or something, I'll leave that to improv in the moment. But most of the time it's that. Partially I do that to make sure that that at the end of the day, once all of the characters are there, that they sound different. Or if they sound similar, like in a way Miss Chapelwhite and Fee sound similar, but Fee is a little Miss Chapelwhite. So I chose to make them sound similar. But in the Lives of Puppets, I played like, I don't know, 35 robots or something. Like, you know. So that was a real process of like, how do I make each one of these robots? Because they have, in his writing, individual personalities. There's a question about that. And so how do I then, you know, give this one a flat voice and give this one a more rangy and, you know, all of that? Because I want you guys, when you're listening, to just know who's talking.
You used a very interesting word, improv. Do you improvise a lot in the work that you do? Is there a moment when you come up and you're just like, I'm just going to see what comes out of my mouth when I do this line and see what goes with it? And Kirt will come back with this, because I want to see if you do that too.
In a way, that's what I'm doing the whole time. I do not know what I'm going to do in a scene. I do not know how it's going to play out. When I had my acting students, I would teach them, you know, do all your prep. There's the work and the play. The work is the preparation. The work is reading the book. The work is doing all that stuff. But when I'm in the booth and I close the door, I'm here to play. You know, so like then it is. So like, and characters might evolve a little bit. I've actually gone back and recorded the beginnings of a character that evolved through it to match that voice back to what that character got to be.
Kirt, I know we've talked about stuff like, especially with the Greenlight series, where I kept intentionally screwing with you by putting in characters that you'd have to do younger and then older versions of the characters and then flashback to different versions of the characters. Is there a time when you just want to fire me as an author and
No, of course not. I would never say that in this event with your name on it.
But no, there's a lot of character work done on my books, and the Green Creek series or In the Lives of Puppets Cerulean Sea, they are large casts of characters. So how do you approach making sure that your voices are diversified enough when you are doing, like, let's use Green Creek for example. You have 4 books that are almost, I don't know, 1 million words altogether.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing Dan talk about his background in the theater, because I feel very similar with my background in speech and debate. For those of you who don't know, it's not just speeches and debate, there's also acting, there's interpretation of literature. And for 15 years, I was teaching 13 to 18-year-olds how to do this work. Like, you read the passage, you find the characters, and you have to make them distinct for your audience. And so, in a lot of ways, I just got lucky that that was my background and that I had picked up those tools. And I was also very lucky with Green Creek in that I didn't know any effing better. Because
Wolfsong was
my very first audiobook ever. And so I thought, sure, 18 hours and 40 minutes with 30 different characters. That's normal.
You know what's so funny is I picked him because of one voice. I did this with Dan. I picked you because of your Chauncey voice and Nurse Ratched voice. I picked you because of your Gordo voice. Your Gordo voice was remarkable, and that's what put it above anybody else who was auditioning. So the audition that you put through, not knowing what you were doing, was enough to, I mean, look where you are now. Like, it's enough to get you to this point. And so I'm so happy that you took that chance to do that. But what does that look like when you're starting out doing an audiobook like that, never having done an audiobook before? How did you get to that point to want to do that?
How did I get to the point of wanting to do audiobooks? I had a friend who was doing it, and it sounded like easy money. Boy, was I wrong. Sucker. That was not the way it was. But, you know, I mean, like a lot of things in life. I saw somebody doing something cool that I thought maybe I have a facility for this. And I thought, I can do that. And then after that, it's just luck. Because it took, I mean, I think I'd done about 20 auditions before I got that. And I told this story before, but I'm going to tell it again really quickly. Because I, at that point in my life, was at a crossroads. I was in a 9-to-5 that was killing me mentally. And my husband and I had decided it was time to leave that job because I just couldn't. Like, he found me pacing the floors at like 3 a.m. one night. I was like, okay, maybe we need to move on. And so I went upstairs and I typed my letter of resignation and I hit print and I closed that window. And there was the email saying that I had gotten the job. And so whatever, you know, you believe in as far as like the universe or God or spirits or just dumb luck, like I took that as a sign that this was the right thing to do at the right time.
That would have been in 2016?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The summer of 2016.
That's crazy. And since then you've done, how many audiobooks do you think you've done?
So I think on Audible right now it says I have like 165, but there's always a lag there. So let's say 175. And is it everything that you thought it would be? Is it more? What took you by surprise about the audio narration community, the process, any of that stuff? What's something that surprised you being in this position you're in now? Well, first of all, the audiobook community is like the best group of people you're ever going to meet. If you have a chance to meet an audiobook narrator, do it. One, they'll be thrilled that you even know who they are. They'll be thrilled that you even know their name and their work. But they're also just like the most generous and kind and giving community that I've ever been a part of. And so that was surprising. I hate to dwell on the negative, but like you've put me in that headspace so many times. The hardest part for me that I did not expect was just the isolation. Like it's a very lonely gig. So thank you guys for being here. Being around, talking into a microphone and there's somebody on the other side of it? What is this? That I think was the biggest surprise / challenge that took a lot of time to get used to. I don't know how it was for you.
Yeah, I have a, I like the isolation in a way, but I also, like I've been running this theater forever, and so that's always been that part of me, but there is something also like, oh, I can just close my little door. My booth is 3.5 feet wide by 3.5 feet wide. And my husband calls it my cockpit. I have everything there at my fingertips. And I can go away into that world, the world that I'm reading, that I'm trying to interpret. So I really like that aspect, but I do miss live theater, right? So I've been dealing with audiences my whole life. And now my audience is 6 months away, and I'll never see them. But I'm really enjoying exploring this other aspect of me. And the thing that I learned about myself by doing this, and actually Cerulean was the one that really challenged me to step up, is that I had no idea that I had the ability to create characters in the way that I do. I had no idea.
Even with a background in theater?
Yeah,
that was something that was inside you?
You don't get to play every part in the theater.
That's true.
Right? As the director, I could in a way, right? But so I would play this, and yes, there was a character here or a character there, but to play like 55 characters or whatever is in Cerulean, like I didn't know that I could do that. The audiobook producer, he did know that somehow. And he heard a sample of my voice and he's like, I have a book for you 6 months from now. He knew immediately from me sending him an email, my sample. And then he sent me the audition material, and which by the way was the first chapter of the book and the whole thing. And I did, my audition was that whole thing. It's usually about 5 minutes for an audition. This was a 14-minute audition. And then when I sat down to record the audiobook, I kept listening to that to bring back what I had done in the audition. And I reached out to the producer and I was like, I'm not sure what I would do any differently now that I've read the whole book. And could we possibly just use my audition as the first chapter And we did. So the first chapter of The House on the Cerulean Sea was my audition for The House on the Cerulean Sea.
You've gotten a job. You've gotten a book that you have to record. What does a typical day for the both of you look like when you're in the middle of recording a book?
Generally, I'll do a little business in the morning, but that's mostly spent. I'm doing that because we're sort of entrepreneurs, so we have to keep a business running as well as actually being in the booth. So while my voice is warming up, I use that time to do the business work. And I'm usually in the booth if it's in a studio, it's a 6-hour day. But at home, I'm usually in the booth about 4 hours in a day. And then I'll go and sit on, I live in Los Angeles, I'll then go and sit on my deck and just veg out at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or I'll read whatever I'm prepping next. So it's a constant thing, I work constantly, but the actual tasks vary. I'm reading now, so I'm prepping, and then, then I go back and do the character work, which is a different set of prep,
Yeah, I have an office that's outside of my house because the booth is just better elsewhere. So I have a bit of a commute, which is good because I was a 9-to-5 job guy for so long, but having that Monday to Friday work week is unusual for narrators, but it still works for me. So I drive to work. I usually have a cup of coffee or tea or just some water at the office, and then if I do not get in my booth by 9 a.m., I may as well go home right now. Because my brain needs that routine and that consistency. Anybody in the room with ADHD will understand what I am talking about. So 9 to noon, 9 to 1 is when I get my work done. And then after that is then I can engage with emails or book prep for the next thing. Because if I start my day with that, that's what I'm doing for the rest of the day. A couple weeks ago because we were coming to this big audiobook publishers conference, I was like, I need to real quick update my website just to make sure everything is up to speed. 3 p.m. rolled around and I was like, oh my God, how did that happen? So, yeah.
Okay, we are almost getting ready to audience questions. We're going to have 2 more readings, though, from YouTube. But I wanted to ask one question before we get to that. Is there a genre that you have not narrated in that you want to be able to narrate in? For me, I want to write, there's a genre that I want to write in that I've never written in, which is horror. I want to write horror very, very badly, and I will do that one day.
I'm sure you'll write it very, very wonderfully.
Oh, God.
You're fired. But is there a genre or a type of book, you can say a different kind of textbook if you need to, but is there a type of book or a genre of book that you have not done that you would love to do that you think that you would be a perfect fit for? This might be just like a job for the people back there.
You go first, thank you.
I would love to do historical fiction.
I would be very good at historical fiction.
That's really an area I have not worked in that I think I would find great joy and success in.
Yeah.
I've been very lucky in that, again, sort of coming into this, being who I was in the world, but not knowing I had this talent. I know some people are very much they are only basically given romance work, or they're only basically given this work or that kind of work. And I work with all the publishers. They all hear me differently, and I guess the way my voice sort of goes up and down, and so I've done 10-year-old trans boy stories. I've done 55-year-old Russian men. So I've done a lot of genres and a lot of different things. So
lesbian rom-com?
I've not done lesbian rom-com, but I don't know that I'd be very good at that.
You don't know unless you try.
That's true. That's true. But so I every time I get another genre that I haven't had before, I get scared, and then I say, oh, but they think I can do it, so I must be able to do it. And so it's really been a great journey. I feel like I'm sure there are genres I'd love to do, but I've done historical fiction. I do about 30% fiction, about 70% nonfiction. So
I didn't know that was the difference. For some reason in my head I had it switch.
Yeah, no.
You were doing that.
Yeah.
Okay, Kirt, Would you do a reading for us? What book are you going to read from?
This is from a little ditty called Wolf Song.
And just by the way, Wolf Song is getting re-released by Tor, and that is coming out July 4th.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very excited about that.
Oh, yeah.
You know how many more people we're going to make cry across this great, great country of ours?
Yeah. Wait.
If you have not read the Green Creek series, and you've only read The House in the Cerulean Sea and Under the Whispering Door, oh. You're like, TJ Klune, you write the nicest gay people. Well, if you want to see disaster days, wait for Green Creek.
Joe took a step toward me, and his stomach muscles were flexing, and the low bass heat of want poured through me. And I remembered werewolves could smell it, and I took a step back in absolute horror. "Hey," I said, and my voice was breaking. I cleared my throat and tried again. "Hey. There's a thing that I have to look at in my house before dinner." Now they were all looking at me weird. They couldn't smell my immoral, raging lust yet, or whatever it was, my feelings that I couldn't be having. Joe took another step toward me, and he had pecs. He had a chest that was just very nice. And it gave me ideas. And I said, "Whoa there, cowboy." And kicked myself internally for such bullshit.
I did not expect you to go that scene. Well played, my good man, well played. And Daniel, if you could share with everybody what you were going to be reading from.
I will be reading from In the Lives of Puppets. In an old and lonely forest, far away from almost everything, sat a curious dwelling. At the base of a grove of massive trees was a small square building made of brick, overtaken by ivy and moss. Who it belonged to was anyone's guess, but from the looks of it, it had been abandoned long ago. It wasn't until a man named Giovanni Lawson, who wasn't actually a man at all, came across it while making his way through the forest, that it was remembered with any purpose. He stood in front of his strange find, listening as the birds sang in the branches high above. "What's this?" he asked. "Where did you come from?" He went inside, passing carefully through the door hanging off its hinges. The windows were shattered. Grass and weeds grew up through the warped wooden floor. The roof had partially collapsed, and the sun shone through on a pile of leaves that almost reached the ceiling. At the top of the leaf pile, a golden flower had bloomed, stretching toward the sunlight, streaming through the exposed rafters. "It's perfect," he said aloud, although he was very much alone. "Yes, this will do just fine. How strange, how wonderful."
Okay, thank you for that. That's so exciting. In the Lives of Puppets is coming April 25th. The audio will be released the same day. You can pre-order now. I believe out there they have QR code that you can scan. What do y'all see? Anyways, it's now time for questions. If you have questions, we have microphones that are going to be coming. We have microphones in the back. If you have a question, please raise your hand. The microphone will be brought around to you. And remember, whoever is answering the question, please repeat it for the live streaming audience. Going to. So who do we have going first?
This is Travis. Hello. Hi. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful tonight. My question is for...
That mic doesn't work. So, that's okay, hold on, just give it a second.
We're gonna bring that down.
My question is,
I like it.
thank you so much. My question is for the narrators. What type of microphone and audio equipment do you use to get the job done? Thank you.
Okay, so the question is, what type of microphone and other audio equipment do we use to get the job done? So we both record at home primarily, right? So first and foremost, most importantly, is a really quiet, dead space when it comes to sound. So I have a booth in my office, and then I have an 8kg C414 microphone because Michael Crouch, who is right over there, said that that was the microphone he uses, and I think he's amazing. So I was like, I'm gonna get that microphone.
I also have a booth. I have a whisper room, my cockpit, and I use a Rode NT1A, which is not a high-level microphone. It happens to catch the timbre of my voice and the sort of the resonance of it in a way that like even the Neumanns don't. I try, now that I'm a little more successful as an audiobook narrator, like, oh, I could buy a better mic. And I can't find one that actually captures it better. So I use that, and then I use an SSL2 preamp, and then, just basic Adobe Audition.
The nice thing about now versus when I got started was there is so much information on the internet now about how to do this job that there was not back in 2016. So people who are interested, check that out. I don't like this.
So I think we're gonna switch to, I'm gonna put this mic in the middle and if people want to queue up in the middle, that's okay. I have a little technical difficulties, sorry.
Ooh, there's a queue.
Hello, people at home, by the way.
Hi.
My husband.
You are all so obedient, and I am so impressed. You nailed it. You guys are amazing.
Hello, I'm scared this is gonna go crazy. Thank you both, that was really special. I have a kind of a two-part question because I'm gonna cheat. So I have one for TJ and I have one for the narrators. So for the narrators, how has your job influenced how you read? Do you find yourself switching more to audiobooks, or is that too close to work that you prefer traditional physical or ebook reading? And then for TJ, I love how enthusiastic you are about your narrators and how they contribute to your work. So how does knowing your work is so well received in audio form impact how you write future books?
So if you guys know anything about me, you'll say, oh, this guy is super nice. He's so awesome. He's so cool, wonderful. I'm actually a jerk. So when I was writing, Tales from Verania, in the first book there was a song that I wrote that Michael Leslie had to sing. And he, not only did he sing it, he wrote music and did this whole production behind it. So I wanted to see if I could break Michael Leslie. So in the third book, I wrote an even harder song, something more impossible, just to try to mess with him. I like, when I know that I'm going to be working with specific narrators for long term, take Kirt for Green Creek, for example, I will try to mess with him as much as possible in future books. Like, oh, here comes a flashback for a character that we haven't seen in 2 books, and now you have to do 30 pages of conversation with these characters. And I do that knowing full well Kirt is going to get to that point and go, that motherfucker. And he does. Oh, trust me, he does. I've gotten plenty from him about, oh, this is what you did in Green Creek? This is what you did these characters, these flashbacks? Yeah, that's what I feel like. That's what he's told. Well, that's why I'm not an audio narrator. Okay, you guys, in your question?
This is such an intuitive, good intuition on this question, because so the question was, being audiobook narrators, does that change how you consume literature, basically? I am and was a huge audiobook fan. I'm still a huge audiobook listener. I love audiobooks, but you nailed it on the head, yes. Now that I do this, sometimes I will hear things in an audiobook and I'm like, nope, can't do it. And it has nothing to do with the quality of the performance. It's just different enough from what I do that I can't stop thinking about it. But the other thing that took a while is I had to like rediscover how my love of reading off of like an e-reader or in a physical book, because more so than even listening to audiobooks changed, how I took in text suddenly became all about, well, what would I do with this voice? And how would this name be pronounced? And so it took years to turn the work in my brain off when I was just reading for fun.
Similar in certain ways. Again, running this theater forever and doing so many new plays, I didn't have time to read books anymore. I probably read 500 plays a year. So reading books again is just a joy just to begin with. But it definitely has changed the way I do it. I do love audiobooks. I love listening to other narrators. So like with Michael Crouch, I was like, Michael, what's your favorite book you've ever done? That's the one I want to listen to of yours. And he's like, this one. And he was right, it's fantastic. But now when I read a book, I'm working on it. Like I immediately, it's like because that's now my milieu in books. You know, I'm now, what would that character sound like? What would this be? What is the story that's being told? And so, but when I'm listening to them, I can be an audience member again, as opposed to when I'm trying to read it. I'm a big John Irving fan. He used to be my favorite living author. Now he's my second favorite living author.
You have something on your nose.
Lee Bardugo being my first. And so he has a new book that came out, and I got it on audio, and I got it on hardcover, and I'm actually reading it on Kindle, because that is definitely, this thing is in my hand 24 hours a day, because this is how I do all of my work. It's on this. So I have the hardcover, I've listened to a little bit of the audiobook, but that one I'm actually trying to read like a normal person. It's not working very well, but I try.
Hi.
Hi, I'm gonna start by just like thanking all of you guys, because you know the queer rep that TJ writes is like so necessary in a lot of people's lives and mine as well. And I'm a huge audiobook listener because I work with spreadsheets and I need something in my head. So it's funny how you guys are talking about how it's very like isolated. You guys are like my best friends. Like, you've made my best friends. You've voiced my best friends. So thank you so much for that. Like audiobooks are super, super important. I've listened text to speech in Kindle and it is not the same. So thank you. But I just kind of was wondering, one of the reasons why you guys, and Michael Leslie, who's not here, which I'm so sad about because he's one of my favorites too, one of the reasons why you guys are my favorites is because you bring such life to these characters and to these books. It's like you're listening to a movie. So I'm just really interested in to hear like a little bit of how you kind of come up with those characters, if there's any character you've narrated that you relate to really well, and just speak to that, because I think that really is one of the things that sets you three, Mike Leslie included, apart from a lot of the audiobooks I've listened to. It's like that uniqueness of really bringing them to life.
And that doesn't even need to be from my book. If you have a favorite character that you've done over the course of your career, totally go ahead.
Well, I mean, I have to. He'd be very upset.
I would be very upset.
He would, not you. You wouldn't be very upset, but Chauncey would be very upset. And you know, and so people ask, well, where'd you come up with that voice? Well, I didn't come up with the voice. He wrote, Chauncey said wetly. And I was like, wetly? I mean, I know wet. How do you, or what's wet? How is wetly? And you know, and so wetly to me, after thinking about it, well, he has to get you wet when he talks to you. So that's where the lip came from, because he talks wetly, you know? So I look for those clues, you know, and you're so good at giving those things. And I think it's like 2 places in the whole book where it says that about Chauncey, but it says it and it's there. So that's who Chauncey is. You know, I'm not bringing my own idea to any of these characters, which I might do in theater, But in the books, I am interpreting, I feel like I am the vehicle for the author. That I am somehow the writer in that moment. Or I'm trying to channel the writer beyond the words on the page. Like what the soul was in the words on the page. And so a lot of characters come for me like that because I'm so invested in how the author describes them.
Yeah, very similar. I can't take much credit for the characters that are created because the authors do most of the work. I would say even more important to me than creating somebody who might be entertaining or memorable is just creating a character that is truthful. And some authors like TJ Klune write insanely stupid characters, but there is still the essence of humanity and truth that is inside of them, and that is what I look for when I'm creating a character.
Thank you so much.
Hello, thank you guys so much for being here. All of your stories and your way you tell the stories has really gotten me through grad school, so I really appreciate you guys coming out. My question is, so I know sometimes for nebulous reasons, books get turned into radio plays, and I have no idea if sometimes the audiobook readers participate in that, sometimes they don't, but if there's a book that has a huge cast of characters, like a lot of TJ Klune's books, are there any dream casts you would want to work with, other audiobook readers you would kind of want to play with in that space with a radio play adaptation of a book?
So the question is dream casting a radio play of a TJ Klune book with other narrators. Oh,
I'd say Kirt Graves, Daniel Henning, and Michael Leslie.
Yeah.
We want to keep that a closed pool. We like the work.
What would that story even be?
Get to it.
Okay.
I mean, like I said earlier, I haven't met an audiobook narrator yet that I don't like. So I feel bad naming names because there are just so many amazingly talented people who are in this industry, and I'd be happy to work with any of them. But I think the idea is brilliant. Yes, Macmillan. Maybe
those are the bosses over there.
Maybe a radio drama of a TJ Klune story would be really interesting.
Or maybe I should just write one.
Right,
that works.
As long as I'm in it.
And the audiobook world is turning into that. I mean, there are many multicast projects now. I just did a series for Audible that I can't talk about, but it's a 10-part thing. It's written by a major, novel writer, fiction writer, and this is a whole new story that he's written. And it's like a radio drama because it's actually acted out like characters talking to each other, etc. And there's lots of those kinds of things now. So that is definitely something that is even going to be coming more strongly into the audiobook world. So you're going to be hearing even a lot more.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, this is a question for all three of you. Do you ever find yourself drawing character inspiration from unexpected or surprising sources? Or what are the places you find inspiration that you don't always get to talk about or don't seem obvious to most people?
In the Lives of Puppets exists because I bought a Roomba vacuum. And I put googly eyes on it. And then I turned it on, and if you've gotten a Roomba vacuum before, you know that it has to start mapping out the house of where it is. I got the Roomba vacuum, put googly eyes on it, and it immediately went into a corner and got stuck. And made the saddest little beeping sound that I've ever heard. And that's when I knew its name was Hank. And this was Hank, but also his name was Rambo. And there was this whole story beyond this whole world. It's never happened to me before. But the reason In the Lives of Puppets exists is because of capitalism.
And by the way, before I started recording In the Lives of Puppets, I bought a Roomba and named it Rambo. And that was my a little bit of inspiration of trying to discover what he had discovered with his Roomba.
Let's get in the mind of TJ Klune. Why does he think the way he thinks?
And I also have a Roomba, but it has not yet inspired any character. But I will say, if you listen, I know what TV series I was obsessed with if I go back and listen to one of my audiobooks, because I just steal all of those actors' voices, and then when I move on to the next TV series, I'm like, well, okay, now I'm using their voices.
What TV show were you obsessed with during Greenlight?
Well, none. because your writing doesn't need, I don't need to do that. Your writing, and I'm not just blowing smoke. Like, again, there are some books where it's like the author just gives you everything you need. But there are other times when I was like, yep, I was watching Madam Secretary while that was being recorded, because I can hear Taya Leone in my head.
And if I was inspired by somebody else, or like doing a particular character or what have you, you probably wouldn't know it, not because I'm trying to hide it. I think I'm doing the full out thing of that, and somehow it gets translated when it comes out of my mouth. So everything I think I'm doing is different than what you end up hearing. And it took me a long time to figure that out, and that in fact, that's my process. Right, so, you know, and I really enjoy that, and now I can know that and not be so weird about it, and not be like, oh, does it sound like Liza Minnelli? Jesus. And, you know, so I'm inspired by things, and I might even literally be trying to do that voice, but it doesn't sound like that voice when it comes out.
I did just think of one very specific TJ Klune character that was inspired by something very specific, and I'm sorry if I... What? Oh, it's been so long. What? Under the Whispering Door, the medium. What's her name? Desmond Kibblethorpe. So that voice is... that is the drag queen Jujubee doing an impression. That is the drag queen Jujubee doing an impression of Eartha Kitt.
There's one specifically I could tell you. Helen in Cerulean Sea, the mayor, she's Dixie Carter. I was on Designing Women, and I knew Dixie, and I was like, that woman is Dixie Carter. So that's why I gave her the Southern accent.
Hi. Hello. First off, the last question giver and myself, our Roomba's name is Little Spiffy. Secondly, I don't think for me, especially with ADD and all of that, the hardest thing to do is to like keep pushing on a book that I'm not vibing with. And obviously I'm not asking you to name names because whatever. But I do wonder like what it is like to maybe not be super into a book and then trapped for a 40-hour recording of it, and what you guys do to like motivate yourself to get past that hump of like maybe a book not vibing right away or whatever.
Well, for me, when people ask me what is my favorite book, I mean, of course, well, up until recently, it was Cerulean Sea. But the answer that I give is the one I'm currently recording. And that is my mentality when I step into the booth. Even the 20-hour computer cloud security professional study exam. Like, I have to make that the best thing I've ever read. Like, to me, that is what keeps me there. That is what allows me to get through it all, is I can't judge it. Because it's still my job to do it, no matter what I think of it. And I still have lots of tasks to do, whatever my opinion might be of it. And my opinion can't be in the recording. That's the opposite of what we're here to do, And so I personally, I don't ever feel like, oh, this one's really a slog. I mean, some are easier than others, but, the computer cloud security, I made it through, it was fine. I did 40 hours of that in a row, and, no problem, because I just chose to love it.
Bravo.
Yeah, sometimes it is hard. I don't want to make it seem like it's not, but I was in a, Clubhouse Zoom chat thing with other narrators one time, and the narrator, Sophie Amos, said something that really struck a chord with me. It was that my hardest, worst book is still better than my last day job. This is an incredible career, and I'm so lucky to be doing it, and if I get in my head about not wanting to do something, I just need to tell myself to shut up, because you're not doing that job that used to be killing you. So, that's it.
Hi. Thank you all for being here. I have a question. It's originally for TJ, but I think it can be applied to all three of you. The question is about, a lot of his work is I feel particularly delightful, and it exudes such excited energy and happiness, but the content can be kind of heavy sometimes, and also the world itself is heavy. So I'm just wondering how you write such delightful content in a heavy world, and how you all deal with doing your jobs and trying to give delightful characters when life is just not great.
So, in the fall of 2020, I got a message from a father. And in this message, he put it in brackets, said, what follows is from my 8-year-old son. And what followed was this huge block of text. It was like a stream of consciousness, but it was a book report about the house in the Cerulean Sea. So he was basically telling me about my own book. And then he started going away from the book, talking about how the pandemic had made him so lonely and so sad that he didn't know how to be happy anymore. And then he said when he read The House in the Cerulean Sea, it was like he had his friends again, and that he didn't feel as alone as he felt before. And then he asked what I'd like to see his Chauncey costume. So forgetting I was speaking to a child, I said, hell yes. The father sent the picture. It was of this little boy in a full green spandex bodysuit. He had suction cups attached to his arms for the suckers. He had paper towel rolls on top of his head for the socks for eyes, and he put golf balls on top of each one. Painted his lips red, painted his teeth black. He made the costume himself. And that is when I know that, yeah, we all have worse days. The world is a very scary and it is a very dark place. But the things I do for a reason. I do it for a reason for for people like that kid, for anybody else out there, especially in 2023, when all we're seeing is a rise in anti-LGBTQ and anti-trans legislation across this country. I want to make sure that anybody who reads my stories knows that they matter. They matter to me, they matter to people around them, and they matter to our community. Because the reason I write delightful, happy things, even if it sometimes can go to places of darkness, is because I want the people to be reminded that happiness in life exists, and it does not always need to be bad. We don't always need to be sad. Do we need to be mad and sad at certain points? Yes. But there are such moments of beauty and joy in this world, if only we know where to look for them. And if we can find them in the pages of a book, then that is the best thing in the world.
The real magic of TJ's work and other authors who are like TJ is that it's always a little bit of both, right? Like there's struggles, there are challenges, there is sadness, and there is joy, and there is humor, and there is resilience. And to me, there is nothing more queer than that dichotomy, is going through something dark and then making a joke about it.
To me, they're two sides of the same coin. You can't really have one without the other. And I try to live in a joyous way in my life. And I think people describe my work oftentimes as quite joyous. And I love that, but it couldn't be joyous unless I was able to get to the other places. I'm going to tell a quick little story about an email.
Unfortunately, guys, this is the last question. We don't have time for any more. Unfortunately, the event is wrapping up, but we are only in this room for a little bit, so I apologize if we didn't get to your questions. However, we will be doing a signing after this with all three of us, and if you guys want to get in line, if you want to ask the questions, I'm totally fine with that whatsoever, okay? So keep on doing it. Sorry about that, go ahead.
It's not exactly, but it is exactly what you're talking about, or the effect of what you're talking about. I got an email from, you are going to love that. I got an email from a woman earlier this year, or late last year, who is an elderly woman who lives in Texas. She had spinal fusion surgery. She no longer can walk. In Texas, they don't really give you pain medication after the initial couple of days. And she has been basically in bed for years and cannot sleep. She went to my website and she found me and she sent this email to tell me that story. And she said, and then I found the audiobook of The House in the Cerulean Sea. And she said, and I listened to it every night. And most nights, I can get to sleep for an hour or two. And when I do, I often dream that I'm there on the island with those kids and that I can walk again. And that's why both are important. This woman lives only in darkness, but she found this and the joy of this, and it literally changed her life. And
that's the power of what we do and what great writers do, and especially this great writer. And I'm just thrilled to be a technical part of it.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for coming out tonight. This was a very important event for me because I wanted to highlight the wonderful people that you don't always get to see. You don't always get to hear from. As I said, anytime I do panels or events and stuff like that, a lot of the questions have to do with audio. So I've always wanted my audio narrators to get as much time in the spotlight as I do, because their work is just as important as what I do. I want to thank Libro FM for sponsoring the panel, for Den of Geek for doing the live stream, and for Greenlight Books for hosting this. This is wonderful. So, if you've seen me speak before, you know how the story I'm about to tell you. It's very short, but I always want to end my panel, or any event that I do, with telling the story, because it shows you the power of words, okay? I often have to do book clubs, or at least I did. I used to do a lot more book clubs. A lot of them are virtual because of how the pandemic was. One time I got an invitation to do a book club for the House of Australian Sea with a Southern Baptist church. I get on the Zoom call and I see that it is all women in their 70s and 80s. And they are all sitting there in their church while we're doing this meeting. All of them were lovely, wonderful, engaging, except for one. This woman glared at me the entire time, and she did not speak the entire time. So I ended the meeting, I finished up with them, everything was fine. The next day I get an email from this woman, and she is upset with me. She is upset with me because she read The House of the Cerulean Sea, and she was offended that I had put the Antichrist in a book. Even if he was only 6 years old, don't I know what the Antichrist is? Don't I know what he represents? Don't I know the impressionable children who can read this book and think that the Antichrist is a good thing? And while she did come to enjoy Lucy as a character, she still thinks I should have gone in a different direction. And then she ended the email with the greatest sign-off of anybody in the history of emails ever. She ended the email by saying, "But I did not mind the homosexuals."
Thanks, everyone. So if you want to get a sign in from TJ, if you would politely and calmly queue up in front of that table, we're going to take them off stage for a little bit, and we'll come back in about 5 minutes. Thank you, everyone.